G'day Guardians, it's Matt here, and today I want to share some really good high DPS builds for the new Iron Banner sword, the Razor's Edge. I've cooked up 3 builds that maximize damage, one for each class, so it doesn't matter what you play, you'll be able to enjoy this one. The builds achieve the same thing across all 3 characters, which is giving the Razor's Edge some of the highest and most sustained damage within the game. It competes just as good as, if not better in some cases, as our beloved Falling Guillotine, so it's definitely worth learning how the recently nerfed Whirlwind Blade equates to another Void Sword contesting this top spot. We'll be using a variety of damage buffs, elemental wells, and we'll even be discussing the exact perk that you want on Razor's Edge to help give it that 1-up over Falling Guillotine. Now, I don't know how to add or multiply stacking damage buffs together to give you an exact damage increase, but all you need to know is that there's a 15% damage buff, there's 2 different 25% ones, a 35% one, a cheeky little 7% one, and a 15% debuff that applies as well. So if you're a mathematician, please let me know in the comments what this looks like, because I added it all together and I got a 123% damage buff on this, and that definitely didn't sound right to me. But before we dive into this, I wanted to mention that Roguey and I, who create content on this channel, we recently just started our Discord server. Last week, we hit just over 40 people in the server, and I know that probably doesn't seem like many to some people, but it's already feeling like an amazing little community. We've been discussing things like god rolls on weapons, helping sessions inside of PvE, and of course the most important stuff, showing off the latest drip. Thanks to the ANZ Destiny 2 team, we've been able to give away 2 codes for the Follow the Light emblem. I'll be choosing one person from the comments section of this video, and choosing another person who joins our Discord server and posts in the introduction section. Both people obviously need to be subscribed to the channel with the notification bell smacked on. I'll be choosing 2 winners in a week's time, so check the description on the exact time. Good luck, Guardians. Alright, back to the good stuff. Let's go over which exotic armor pieces you'll want and all the void aspects and fragments that pair nicely with this sword. For Titans, you'll want Heart of Inmost Light purely for the reason that you get faster ability regeneration, and since we're using Reaping Wellmaker to make elemental wells, it's a no-brainer. For Hunters, you will want the 6 Coyote for the exact same reason. Double dodge roll cooldowns means that we'll be able to make elemental wells whenever we need them. If you aren't familiar with this mod, don't stress, I will be covering it in the mod section of this video. For Warlocks, I ummed and ahed whether or not Controverse Holds or Nezarec Sin was going to do a better job for this, but after some initial testing, I was finding Nezarec Sin to do much more for this build than Controverse Holds. With Nezarec Sin on, you can slash a handful of enemies with your sword, and that'll refund your Rift back, which is needed to proc elemental wells. Relying on the grenade kills from Controverse Holds to feed a separate mod, which is Bolstering Detonation, was fine, but if you whiff your grenade at all or you throw it into not many adds, the entire process becomes a lot slower, so Nezarec Sin was a lot more consistent and it just came out on top. For the Void subclass, all 4 fragments are exactly the same across each character. Echo of Undermining to apply that 15% debuff with our grenade, which comes in handy for any bosses. Echo of Remnants to increase the duration of our Vortex Grenade, which reminds me, make sure you're running Vortex Grenade regardless of which character you're using. Echo of Starvation to proc Devour from Orbs of Power, which we are making plenty of with our sword. And lastly, Echo of Expulsion, because who doesn't like explosions? For Titans, you'll want Controlled Demolition for even more explosions, and Offensive Bulwark for extra perks on our grenade and melee. These aren't super necessary for the build, but they're still nice. Hunters will want to be running Stylish Executioner to throw some fun invisibility into the mix after each sword kill, as well as Vanishing Step for the dodge roll stealth. Essentially, if you're Hunter with this build and you aren't invisible 24/7, you're doing something wrong. For Warlocks, it really pained me to not use Chaos Accelerant, but here I am. Whack on Child of the Old Gods for some free Rift energy from the little buddy, and feed the Void for the extra Devour assist in case the Orbs of Power just aren't doing it for us. Alright, so the next logical step in the process is to make sure that we have a roll of Razor's Edge that actually allows us to hit harder than Falling Guillotine or Crown Splitter ever did. At the time of this recording, it's currently the final Iron Banner week of Season of the Risen, so your only way of acquiring this sword is from the Iron Banner seasonal quests if you haven't done them already. There's also Saladin's bounties and engrams if you cash in those tokens, or you can just pray to the RNG gods that one of these drops at the end of a match. Luckily, in Season 17 next season, the Iron Banner rework will come in, and hopefully we can focus one of these to our liking. At the moment though, you do want to try and chase a particular role so that you can utilize some of the seasonal artifact mods while Void is still the hot flavor. That role is Wellspring and Frenzy, and that's because Wellspring feeds our ability energy back on kill, which again, we're using our class ability to create elemental wells, and Frenzy, which gives our sword the slight edge over Falling Guillotine by having a whopping 15% damage buff on all hits, opposed to Falling Guillotine's 30% damage buff from Whirlwind Blade only on its heavy attack, which also relies on 10 light attacks to achieve. To simplify that, in a side-by-side comparison where both swords were doing 10 light attacks and then a heavy attack, Falling Guillotine only benefits from a 30% damage increase on the heavy attack only, whereas Razor's Edge benefits from a 15% damage increase on also the heavy attack, but the 10 light attacks as well, meaning much more sustained damage overall. Alright, so let's jump into the mods to help beef this thing up even more. I'm going to show you them on my Titans perspective, but they're literally the same mods and mod placements on the Warlock and the Hunter as well. What I will do though is discuss how some of these mods affect the different classes and exotic armor pieces along the way. You can also go to the description of this video where I will put a dim link for each class's build, so it's nice and easy to port over for yourself. Going to start off with the mod that begins the string of actions here, and that's Reaping Wellmaker. Reaping Wellmaker spawns a Void Elemental Well after you use your class ability and then you get a kill. So for Titans, that's the Barricade, for Warlocks, that's the Rift, and Hunters, that is the Dodge Roll. That Elemental Well is super important because it dictates everything here. You'll want Elemental Charge because collecting that Elemental Well will now give you 2 stacks of Charge with Light. We're going to be spending those stacks of Charge with Light with Lucent Blade. Lucent Blade is a 35% damage buff to your sword that lasts for 5 seconds for every stack of Charge with Light that you have when you begin dealing damage with the sword. Lucent Blade isn't the only thing that Elemental Well provides us though, we are also going to benefit from the seasonal artifact mod, Volatile Flow. Volatile Flow gives us a damage buff called Volatile Rounds, and even though this is a sword that doesn't necessarily use rounds, the damage buff will make enemies volatile, and those volatile explosion ticks for about 25% of your damage output. Another amazing damage buff for this sword. On your helmet, you'll want to run a copy of Harmonic Siphon to create orbs of power for getting sword kills. That'll help proc and feed our Devour buff that we discussed from the subclass fragment earlier on. Lastly, you will want Font of Might, a 25% damage buff that lasts for 10 seconds after collecting that Elemental Well. On your arms, you will want to try and have 2 copies of Bolstering Detonation, which will feed us class ability energy from grenade damage. This synergizes well with the Titan build since Heart of Inmost Light is already reducing our cooldowns, and for Warlocks, since Nezarec's Sin is essentially reducing all of our cooldowns all the time, having extra grenade and rift energy is always helpful with this build. Hunters will usually have a dodge roll up since the cooldown is so quick and 6 Coyote gives you 2 of them. Essentially, all 3 classes here should have no problem having their class ability up all the time, this allowing you to generate an Elemental Well from Reaping Wellmaker. Alright, so let's talk about how this build actually plays out. First things first, we know that we don't need 4 different damage buffs to take down packs of red bar adds. They're normally just dying from literally one single light attack with the sword, so trying to string everything together all the time is just not practical. The idea here is giving this sword the highest potential damage output, and if some of those damage buffs only last for 10 seconds, it's probably a great idea to create the Elemental Well just before a boss damage phase. Everything is kind of working in the background as soon as you collect that Elemental Well. Your Font of Might is a 25% damage buff that lasts for 10 seconds. Your Volatile Flow will kick in for around 15 seconds. The Frenzy perk on your sword should be active by the time you're dealing any big damage. And Lucent Blade will proc once you start dealing damage for a 10-second duration also. By all means, create that Elemental Well and burn down packs of adds. You don't need to save all the enjoyment for boss damage. That's the beauty of this build. But also a credit to how versatile swords are. Because of the Wellspring perk, you'll be able to use this to mince through adds like crazy, but with the potential to ramp it up if you need to melt through bosses as well. It's literally a one-stop shop for ad clearing and big DPS. As for the stats on this build, they're gonna look a little bit different across the 3 characters. For Titans, I've maxed out on Resilience because that's tied to the Barricade cooldown, and we want that as quick as possible so that we can spawn more Elemental Wells through Reaping Wellmaker. I've also put some points into Discipline since I am using Heart of Inmost Light, and quick abilities just make the cycle of cooldowns a lot better. For Warlocks, I would try and max out Recovery. You can see that I've also done this for Discipline as well. Your Rift cooldowns are tied directly to your Recovery stat on Warlock, and faster grenades means that Bolstering Detonation mod can kick in more often to help speed that Rift cooldown even further. For Hunters, it's the same case, but with max mobility instead of recovery, and keeping max discipline if possible also. Having 100 mobility means that our dodge rolls come back every 11 seconds, meaning that we can make those elemental wells faster than the other two classes usually. But that's everything from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed the build through the lens of 3 different classes. Normally I'm just looking at one class specifically, so it was a nice change to include all of them in this one. Don't forget to enter the giveaway, sub to the channel, and either leave a comment on this video or join the Discord server for a chance to win, or do both of those things if you want a double chance at winning. And I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy, Guardians.